You are always one decision away from a totally different life. It's one of my favorite ideas. It is what I lean on most when moving through some of the most difficult chapters of life. And I think it points to something very important. It points to our tendency to forget how much control we have over our own realities. And not just the small things, but the big things, right? The things that truly challenge us and push us, the things that often feel just beyond reach, larger than life. This idea reminds me that that's not the case. I'm going to give you a few quick examples for context, right? They're very basic. You've heard them before. The first is my health. What changed everything was the decision to start associating with people who knew more and were willing to help. Not rocket science. But at the time, I would have said, it absolutely is. Right? I started to piece by piece realize that everything was solvable. And even some of the things that weren't totally solvable, like an elbow issue, for example, it could be made better to the point where I could work around it. It didn't have to prohibit me from living my best life. It wasn't the giant problem I made it out to be in my mind. The list continues on. My work, every day hating what I was doing, until one day I thought, well, no. That's enough, right? The pain of the unknown is better than this silent, slow withering away. That's pain. And did I know what I was doing? No. Did it bring about a new type of discomfort altogether that I hadn't ever experienced? Yes. But it put me, for the first time in my life, on a trajectory to figure things out. Last example, the wrong romantic relationships, the wrong business partnerships, the wrong people in your circle. You only need to decide once, no more. You only need to decide once, hey, I'm out. I deserve better. Then you begin a process of healing and self-recreation. See, we don't act very often because we don't know what the solution is. And on its face, that's practical, right? That makes sense. But it's not a reason to keep yourself in a prison of discontent. I think for two reasons. One, the misalignment you're feeling, that feeling in your stomach that things are not right, is in and of itself a reason to go, to change, to adjust. And two, you don't start with the answers. You pick up answers along the way. You look in the mirror, you say, okay, I'm ready for more. You step out the front door, and then you collect results. It is not the other way around. And I think that's the problem. People conflate that thing they need with a complete solution. When in reality, the thing you need most very often isn't a complete solution, but it is a bridge from where you are now to a process of recreating yourself. In fact, one of my favorite anecdotes was by John Maxwell, the grocery store at night. Right? You walk out of the grocery store, you have your bags, it's dark, it's pitch black. It's unsettling. But you make your way to the car. Put your bags in the trunk, you get in, you turn the headlights on, and what do those lights give you? They give you just enough to pull out of the parking space. Can't see anything behind you or what's going on around you, but the lights give you enough to pull out of the space. And then they give you just enough to get to the edge of the parking lot. And then they give you just enough to turn onto the street. And then just enough to make a right turn at the stop sign and onto the main road. And on and on and on until you arrive at your house. And so the question worth all the money in the world is, did you have all the answers at the beginning? Was the whole path lit up for you before you got in the car? Absolutely not. But what you had was enough to begin the process of getting from where you were to where you needed to be. And so you made the decision to get in the car and turn the lights on. Now, using that exact same metaphor, think about how crazy, counterproductive, just nonsensical it is to stay in that parking lot in the dark with your groceries. Because there's no light illuminating every step, because you can't, where you stand, see the entire path. Right? No, the decision to get in the car is the one decision that separates you from a totally different life. It's what begins the process of the snowball becoming an avalanche. It's the small thing that ultimately becomes monumental. See, life is peaks and its valleys, its seasons, its highs and its lows. But I'll tell you, many of you are standing in the dark right now, keys in your pocket, car an arm's length away, hesitant to get in and turn it on because, well, who knows what will happen when you pull out of the parking lot. But here's another way to ask the question. Who cares? Give yourself some credit. Trust yourself to figure things out, right? Losing is not starting a new adventure and getting lost. That's life. You'll make adjustments and figure it out. Losing is staying where you are in the dark because you're afraid, because you don't have all the answers, because you don't know everything, because you're not a god that can predict the future and understand and see what's lurking around every corner. Winners didn't start with more answers. They started with the courage to step into the dark in pursuit of those answers. They trusted themselves to, day by day, attack the puzzle and the mystery that is life. You have what you need, and you have it now. Let the fact that things are misaligned, that your soul is telling you things are not right, that more is out there, that you can be better, let that be your green light. And your decision to go, again, may not airdrop you at a finish line or a mountaintop, but it will be enough to start that process. It will be enough to empower you, to remind you that you are one decision away from starting the journey that will change your life. If you remember nothing else, remember this. You have the ability to be stronger than you can even imagine. And this is an enormous and, you have the ability to do that when life is at its worst, when things are hitting the hardest, when you most want to cower and retreat into yourself. That's when you have the opportunity and the ability to shock yourself, to be greater than you've ever been. There are certain things I do in my life to reinforce this point. That's how important I think it is. Why? Well, not to sound tough, not for Instagram. In fact, most of the time I don't share it or post it or any of that stuff. I do it for me because it's an axe that has to be sharpened, reinforced. It's been some time since I've gone on a run. Like I've said recently, for those of you following along on YouTube and the podcast, I've taken you along on my fitness journey. I've been more focused on picking heavy things up and putting them down, right? The gym, gaining some weight, putting on some muscle, and it's been effective. But the other day, I'm like, I just need it. I need to run. I need to do it for me. So I put on the old running shoes and did about 7 miles. And look, I knew I'd be rusty. I knew I'd be slower than I was, a year ago, obviously, but that's not the point. The only point here was negative splits, right? It was to be faster every mile than the one before it. So right out of the gate, very slow, relaxing, 9-ish minute miles, then high 8s, then low 8s, then high 7s, then low 7s, and ended in the 6s. And it's an exercise that solely reinforces, hey, when you get tired, when things become more difficult, when emotionally, you become fatigued, that doesn't mean you slow down or you give in. In fact, you can wire your brain to say, okay, this is exhausting, so I need to be better. And that's all it was, reigniting that flame, turning that switch on. Because the same thing, running that 7 and change mile loop, is true in life. When we're most tempted to sort of retreat back into ourselves is when we must be bigger, and we can be bigger. Let's further drill this home. From the running thing, let's move to a different metaphor. Imagine with me a bridge. And this old wooden bridge is connecting two mountains, right? Moving right through a little town nestled in between them. And for years, that bridge had carried travelers and business folks and families across the deep valley below. It was sturdy, reliable. But the reality is it had never truly been tested. That is, until one year, a storm came. And the wind howled through the valley, and the river below became turbulent and rough, and the rain beat down like war drums. All the people below, they looked up and they feared that bridge wouldn't last, that it wouldn't make it. They watched from their homes, expecting any second to see it buckle, to snap under the pressure. But something remarkable happened. The weight of the storm did not break the bridge. Instead, what it did was reveal the bridge's strength. The wood groaned, but it held firm. And the ropes stretched, but they did not snap. It stood. Not because it had never faced hardship before, but because it had been built for this exact moment. And when the storm finally passed, and those people from the town below looked up at it, they didn't see a bridge anymore. They saw an entity that had truly proven itself, that had endured. And that's what we are. It's who we are, and it's what we're capable of, right? The challenge is that we don't know we can endure until we've weathered the storm. We don't understand our ability to maintain until we've held strong against the winds, until we've allowed ourselves to rise when it feels like the world's pulling us down. The storm doesn't make us weak. It reveals how strong we've been all along. And so understand this when times are great. Why not? Put yourself through the manufactured stress, duress, and discomfort I mentioned above, when things are smooth sailing. Absolutely. But if you're in it, and I mean truly in the thick of things, right, moving through the storm, the darkness of night surrounding you, I want you to remember how much of you lives beneath the surface, waiting to be shown, to be let out, to be freed. Remember that the greatest parts of you need your permission to shine and emerge, but that when they do, nothing, and I mean nothing life throws your way, is too much to endure. Will there be turbulence and chaos around you? Absolutely, you can bet on that. But the calm and resilience within you conquers all. Always remember that. You are stronger than you think you are. You, now and always. When you lose your job and have no idea what you're gonna do next, yes, you are stronger than you think you are. When your forever person, quote unquote, ends up not being so forever, you're stronger than you think you are. When your world's tipped upside down, you're stronger than you think you are. When health issues arise, and it was once very simple now becomes complex and chaotic and exhausting. You are stronger than you think you are, strong enough to endure, strong enough to make it through. Again, the storm does not exist to break you. It exists to remind you how strong you've always been. Too often, we overcomplicate the simple. It's like, what is the exact map? Is every detail correct? How do we solve for X but mitigate Y? Right? All of those things are nice, but none of them are critical. What's critical is focusing on the next step forward. Come along with me for a little journey. I just finished running 100 miles from Key Largo to Key West with some friends, and while there's plenty to unpack here, and I'll certainly be doing so in upcoming episodes, I want to talk specifically about a man and fellow runner named Austin. Because while everyone along for the journey was beyond impressive, after all, we didn't need to be there, while every one of us found within ourselves the courage to push harder and dig deeper than we previously had, while every single one of us did something challenging that most people wouldn't do, the reality is only one other person besides myself completed all 100 miles. And in a results-driven world, that matters. It just does. And so I want to talk about that person, Austin, who certainly has overcome a lot, right? He was telling me about his journey through some of the adversity that has made him who he is today. Powerful is an understatement here. While he's clearly an athlete, has some boxing matches under his belt, could probably curl my body weight at the gym, he was no distance or ultra runner, at least not until last week in the Keys. And so, the first 20 miles goes by, and I consider the first 20 miles, it's like fun, it's exciting. You have the whole race ahead of you. Nothing's hurting yet. Your lower body isn't kicking or screaming. There's no blisters or cramps or rash or fatigue. It is smooth sailing. But then you know how the game goes. 20 becomes 30, becomes 40, becomes 50, and then life steps in. And sometimes, it's a blown out knee, or it's, your heart acting up. Those are things that you can't do anything about. You've been dealt a rough hand. You tip your cap to fate. You say, this time you got me, but I'll be back. And that certainly happens. But in my mind, that's the exception. Most of the battles in an endeavor like this are of the mind. It's warfare of mindset. It's will. It's resilience. And watching, this probably 200-pound dude continually push towards that finish line, running when he could, walking when he had to, it was a courage that's hard to articulate. Particularly evident, and this stands out to me, or stood out to me, on the water breaks, where we all would sit, sometimes in quiet, sometimes talking about the road ahead, having some snacks, the breeze hitting our faces. But these pauses, these moments of rest, I've come to find here, as well as other physical challenges I've done, these moments in time are what capture most souls, because it's like people don't quit while they're moving. For some reason, they quit while they're sitting down, while they're taking a breather, enjoying the calm, a bag of chips, while they're reminded what absence of pain feels like. And that alarm sounds, hey, let's go, boys, it's time. That's when the, nah, I'm good. the nah, no thank you, or I'm done, that's when those emerge. But I'll tell you, every time that alarm went off, he'd shut his brain off and he'd stand up. His feet looked so destroyed that I won't even share images of them. But it didn't matter. He'd limp over to the road where we would continue on. The same way, if you think about a feather, right, really has no say if one were to drop it off a bridge. It's like the second the hand releases it, it's at the mercy of gravity. It's gonna float down to the world below, doing what it has to do. And, I'll be real, it wasn't always pretty. It was ugly at times. There were times where it was, faster than I thought it would be. There were times where it was excruciatingly slow. There were times where it was through the heat of a South Florida, sunny day. And there were times where it was, chillingly cold in the middle of the night. But either way, all 100 miles, every single step of them were covered. And see, me, I've been doing this for years. I love it. Well, hate it during the middle, of course, but that's the game. I'm built for this through years of repetition. It wouldn't be fair for, us to compare our pursuits. I imagine it'd be relatively similar to me walking into a boxing ring with him, right? That would be a bad day for me. Well, in a way, distance running like that is my boxing ring, which is why, I felt like him stepping into it. He wasn't just doing it for himself. It felt like he was carrying a burden for all of us, a gift for us to hold on to tightly as we said goodbye to our friends and hopped back onto a plane to normalcy. Some questions gift wrapped for me to take back to the desert. 1. Are you putting yourself through something completely foreign, new challenges? Not, this is kind of annoying type adversity, but I'm in so far over my head here that I'm drowning type adversity, because that's where change happens. And 2, are you, even when walking through the flames of hell, trusting your ability to put one foot in front of the other? To step back out onto the sidewalk regardless of externalities? Because the vast majority of our battles happen not out in the world, but in our minds. The stories we tell ourselves are everything. And that's not a nice little cliche for an Instagram quote. That's the difference between reaching mile 100 and looking up, wishing you had. It's the difference between evolving into your potential and staying where you are. In many ways, it's the difference between the person you currently are and the person you can become. And so, most likely, you're not on mile 80 of a 100-mile run, but you do have your equivalent. And maybe your feet aren't torn up and your legs aren't sore, but you do have your source of discomfort and duress. And what I need you to remember is that getting there requires, when that alarm goes off, you stand up, you step out onto the battlefield, and you continuously push forward. Through the heat, through the cold, beyond the pain and doubt and uncertainty and questions about what it'll all mean. What if this goes wrong or this happens? Right through the center of all of it. Because the journey may seem long, but the journey is never your responsibility. One more step is your responsibility. Trusting that little things will culminate into big things is your responsibility. Understanding that when the world bows down, you can be the one who stands up, says no, and carries on. That is your responsibility. The funny thing about running 100 miles is it seems so over the top and outlandish that we forget it's just one step many times. Show me someone who can't take one more step. Show me the man or woman who can't figure out how to move 12 inches further into the abyss. For creatures blessed with an ability to think that supersedes all other living things on Earth, it's amazing to me that some of our greatest achievements, our strengths, our superpower requires that we cut the thinking off and simply stand up and rise to the occasion over and over again. Not when we want to or when it feels right, but when we are called to. If you think like that, if you can rewire your mind to make that your reality, that first 100 miles is only the beginning. Staring off into the distance and saw something that, at least from what I understand, is pretty rare in the Scottsdale area. The sky was so hazy that you could barely see the mountains. A blanket around the infinity that I was so used to staring out at. And what do I know for sure as I gaze into the distance? Well, first and foremost, this immersion into chaos is temporary. Because behind that curtain of fog, there exists clarity. There lives the pristine, there is calm. Just tucked away for the moment. And this haze, it's not confined to the mountains of Scottsdale. In fact, this is the very same haze life has a tendency to drop us directly into the epicenter of the unknown. And here's the thing, when life presents us with this haze, we can be angry, but it won't care. We can scream and complain and project out, but it'll pay no mind. Our emotions and the motives of the haze that surround us are mutually exclusive. The only way to win here is to know that clarity exists behind the curtain and like a guided missile walk through the mist until the little shapes start materializing into the recognizable, into everyday life. See, some games are not chess. They're not complex, they are simple. They're about carrying on or not carrying on. Resilience, and that is all. Will you commit to hanging in long enough to capture the skyline that has gifted you peace so many days prior to today? It's not a weather question, or a haze question, or a visibility question. It is a you question. And you get to choose how you'll answer it. Easy, you might think. No, sometimes putting one foot in front of the other is the hardest thing. Shaking hands with the unknown is a taxing thing. It's a courageous thing. But sometimes it is also the only thing. You have to know that right now, no, there is no validation, but I will find some. And sure, there's no road mapped out before me, but I'll blaze my own. And sure, I don't have answers, but the past has proven to me that I can collect them along the way. And what you'll find is that haze, that very cause for discomfort, ends up being an ally. Because through it, we affirm to ourselves that clarity is there and we are beyond capable of capturing it. That when things are their worst, we have the ability to rise to the occasion. That when we don't know, we become manufacturers of solutions. Getting what you want is not a story of navigating paved roads. It's about stepping into the brush and finding a way. Step by step, breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat. And so while the temptation may be to look around right now and say, I don't know how this story ends. I don't know how to handle this turbulence, therefore problem. I invite you to use the unknown, the haze, the chaos, the turbulence as a portal to reality as you see fit. And I invite you through this quote unquote fog of war to begin again. To rediscover a life well lived. Because not only is it possible, it's who you are.